All right, so let's get going. The Champion's Notebook. Now, this is what, if you don't get anything else from this seminar or from this webinar, then I want you to get this down. It's the Champion's Notebook. It is where I get all of my stories, all of my poetry, quotes, anything that I want to share with an athlete or with a group of coaches comes from this Champion's Notebook. And I've been creating this for about 10 years. There's what you can see right here is me literally reading a book, a story at one of my workshops, and I did it in I can't remember the name of the school. They were a great school. I'll remember it in a minute, I'm sure. But I was reading out of this book, and they were reenacting the story as I was reading out of this children's book. It's called There's No Such Thing as Dragons. And with No Such Thing as Dragons, what happens is this little kid sees a dragon, mom doesn't believe that there's a dragon, and then the more she doesn't believe and the more she ignores it, the bigger the dragon gets. And that really is the story. At the very end, she admits the dragon's there, and then the dragon gets smaller. But what I do is when I share that story, I allow afterwards for all the students to break up into little groups and talk about the dragons in their life. So the way I set this up is I'll take seniors, and it's usually high school, right? I've done this in college a couple times, but the groups, you don't have to break them up as specific as in high school because the ages are similar, or relative age actually. But you take the seniors and the sophomores, and you put them in a group, and you take the freshmen and the juniors and you put them in the group. And you tell the juniors and the seniors to share with the younger kids any kind of dragon that could hurt them in the future. Now, these conversations get real, and it's an opportunity for you as a coach or administrator to allow for your kids to be leaders and to share with people that are younger than them. But not by a lot, right? They're still peers, but there's like a year, 2-year age gap. And what that does is it allows for them to pass on knowledge. And that's just one of the things that I do at one of my workshops. But when it comes to this Champion's Notebook, here's what I use. Let's go back. There we go. I use Evernote. Now, Evernote, you can use Word, but Evernote, you're able to add tags. And I'm going to actually put together a PDF of this and send it out to everybody when I'm done. It won't be all the stories. It'll be too big, but I'm going to get a couple of them because there's things like I've done in the past where like I'll have a team memorize the poem Invictus, where it says, "It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul." But there's 4 stanzas. And so a lot of the teams that I've worked with, especially male teams, they really dig that poem. And so I'll have them memorize it. And then every time I meet with them, we'll talk about it, and you can learn a lot from that poem. But then there's other stories from Aesop's Fable, or if you've ever heard me talk about one of my favorite stories of all time, The Wizard of Oz. I'll read this Champion's Notebook, and then I'll see that story, and I'll be like, that's what I'm going to talk to the team about today. I'm going to talk about how this leader, because Dorothy is a leader, she goes on this quest, and she realizes that she can't do it on her own, so she brings in friends, right? So she brings in the Scarecrow, because when you start doing something, you try to get a bunch of knowledge. And then as you get better at it, you lose heart. And so Tin Man comes in, and then you get scared because you start getting successful and you get that fear of success. And what do you need? Boom, the Cowardly Lion shows up. But at the end of all that, people forget in that story that even though she was delegating and she brought all these people along with her, that at the end of the story, when Glinda, the Good Witch, said all you had to do was click your heels together and say, "There's no place like home." If you've never seen The Wizard of Oz, you have no idea what I'm talking about. The story is done in like 10 seconds, so just hold on. But she says, "There's no place like home." She clicks her heels together. What Glinda was telling her is that you need to move your feet. You need to believe more. And then when people forget about that story, is that Dorothy was asleep the whole time. That everything she needed was inside of her. And with our kids, it's said that sports builds character. It doesn't really. Like Joe Ehrman says that too. He's like, sports doesn't build character, it reveals character. And I find that to be true. But it reveals character in that these kids are looking to us for ways to be an adult one day. They're looking at us for what is the meaning that I can put into what just happened to me. And so, yeah, as I don't believe that sports builds character, it definitely, as coaches, we are whittling away at the character of these masterpieces, these masterpiece humans that are going to be adults one day and that are going to have to, that are marked forever by the things that we're going through right now as a species, right? Everybody's going through this. So I use Evernote and I also use Google Drive. Evernote, there's a fee that goes along with it. I really like the extra benefits, but Google Drive is free. Point is, create a place, a home for stories and poems and writings and articles and all these different things that you want to share with your athletes. Because when you share with an athlete something this year and they show up the next year, maybe they've heard that story, but they're not the same athlete. There's an old proverb that says, no river is the same, or no man steps in the same river twice. Either the man is different or the river is different. And you can have everybody come back after a year, like you have a great year and the entire team comes back. It's not the same team. They've gone through stuff, especially now, right? And they get back to you and they've gone through so much. So definitely find a place where you can keep all this stuff. Now, the 3 R's of character development. Today, we're going to go over respect. There are 3 different parts to this curriculum, and the curriculum will be available. It should be done in about a week or so. If you're in the mastermind, then you have access to it for free, but I'll have all the PowerPoints and stuff up there, and so it'll be available to you. It's broken up into respect, relationship, and readiness. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time explaining respect right now because I'm going to go over it, but when it comes to relationship, there's the relationship with self, there's the self-talk, there's the inner circle. You can see on your screen right there, there's things that you need to be able to kind of focus on as when it comes to relationship, but then also readiness. It's that getting the self ready, that building that character, because reputation is something that's up to everybody else, but your character's up to you. So let's dive in. All right. Respect. The first one is purpose. Now, I'm giving you these as a skeleton. I'm giving you these as a way for you to kind of design your own curriculum. And it's something that I've been using for years now, and I found a lot of success with it. And so let's just dive in. So personal goals and intrinsic motivation. When it comes to goal setting as coaches, we often fail our athletes because we are talking about outcome goals. If you know a little bit about goals in that they're more than just outcome goals, I'll give you an example. An outcome goal, we want to win state. We want to win league. We want to place in the top 3. These are things that happen at the end of the season. Well, process goals happen before the season starts. Process goals happen and performance goals happen, before and during the season. And so we do our kids a disservice when we just talk about, goals for the future. Those are more like vision type stuff. But the personal goals are the things that are going to keep these kids excited about stuff. And they're going to be different for everybody. Don't forget that if you have 12 people on your team, that you have 12 different commitment levels. You might have 2 or 3 that are like, I'm going to be pro. I'm going to go out there. I'm going to get a scholarship and I'm going to get a contract. And then you might have 2 or 3 that are just like, my mom said that I should play. So, I'm out here on the pitch, and that's okay. They're on the same team. And so you want to give them a great experience, but not everybody is going to be, all out. When I was at IMG Academy, I had explained to me, because when I first was going to get there, I thought, oh my gosh, these athletes, everybody's going to be like top notch, dedicated, disciplined. It's basically thirds. It was like a third of those athletes really wanted to be there and they wanted to do something. And they took advantage of everything. And then the second third was kind of lukewarm. They were like, oh, this is cool. This is awesome. And then the bottom third, it was like their parents just dropped them off at the academy and they didn't want to be there. But they were all on the same team. And so as a coach, what we want to do is we want to find what are those intrinsic motivations for each person. Why are they there? Purpose is something that we should talk more about. And if you spend some time getting to know your players and even writing down, why are you playing? What motivates you? That can help you in those really intimate conversations, like on the sideline where the kid's like, oh, I'm really struggling. You can be like, hey, what's your purpose? What's your why? Why are you here? And you can talk about that with them. And that's a great way to kind of strengthen that bond that you have with your athletes. Let's see. Jen says, Reggie Rivers has a great TED Talk about goal setting they use with athletes. Reggie, okay. You started every spring session. Okay, that's cool. Focusing on behaviors. I love that. I sent out top 10 podcasts a couple weeks ago. So if you haven't got that, then shoot me an email and I'll send it to you. But that's really great. Fantastic. Thank you, Jen. All right. Next. There's a little Rocky right there. Respect the team. Now, when I'm doing this curriculum, oftentimes it changes. It kind of evolves over time. I start with purpose, and then I go respect for team, and I let the kids know these are the roles that need to be filled on the team. I need someone who is, like a go-getter, and I need someone that I can count on in the locker room. I need someone that's going to help with logistics. Like, there's so many different roles, and it's not a bad deal, or it's not a bad idea to just share those with the kids. Like, these are the kind of roles that we can fill on this team. I can have 3 people in this role. That's okay. Or maybe it's only 1 person in that role. But to have those roles, either written down somewhere or what they are, and you share that with the kids. Because if you remember, when we were younger, or when I was younger, I played organized sports in high school 25 years ago. And there was no asking the coach why. Coach told you to do something, you did it. That was it. The end of discussion. Nowadays, kids are like, why are we doing this? Why did you say that? What are we doing next? And so you have a different, you have a student that's more curious than they've been allowed to be in the past. And so when you can tell them, look, here is a role that I see you in. I shared a story a couple of weeks ago about when I played high school volleyball, and I wasn't supposed to make the team. I wasn't very good, but at the end I made the roster, and I brought the roster into the coach, and I was like, Coach, how did I make the team? Long story short, because it's a whole story that I love to tell, he said, look, you're not going to play very much because you're not very good, but you're a leader. And these kids, your teammates, he didn't say these kids, he was like, your teammates need you. And so if you want to be on the team, there's a spot for you, but your role will be to help motivate and inspire them. And I was a senior in high school, and I thought, yeah, let's do that. And he was right. I didn't play very much, but I got better. And I was even voted one of the team captains, which taught me, obviously, that you don't need to be good at the sport to help your team win. And we were pretty successful. So that's roles and responsibilities. Now we have respect for diversity. We live in a very evolving society. And which one you focus on, whether you focus on all of them, whether you focus on one, really depends on what's going on in your community. Your kids look at you as a sage, as a guide. They look at you for your behaviors. I remember playing baseball as a junior in high school, and we had a racist coach. I look back on him and I'm like, yeah, that guy was racist. And I remember he would tell jokes. And I was a 16, 17-year-old kid. So I didn't know much about the world other than a coach was telling jokes, and I would laugh at him. Super embarrassed about that now. I was ignorant, and I wish that my coach hadn't have used his authority over us in that manner, but he did. And you don't have to repeat the things that your coach did, which is awesome. We can be our own coach. So whether it's religion, race, ethnicity, gender, age discrimination, fill in the blank, whatever your team needs, find a way to appropriately share with them a different way to approach that stuff. And there's different levels of understanding diversity. You can say, okay, look, just because you tolerate it doesn't mean you accept it. Just because you accept it doesn't mean that you're going to want to also do that. So there's different levels, and to be able to because I have a very specific belief system when it comes to where we came from and how we got here and where we go afterwards. But there's other belief systems out there as well. And so as a coach, you have to be very careful about how you share what it is that you believe, and not just trying to indoctrinate kids in a certain way of thinking. And that's really up to us. We have this amazing voice in our athletes' lives that can put them on a path for good and bad. Billy Graham says, a coach will have more influence on an athlete than any other person in that guy or girl's life. So remember that. And when I do this respect for diversity part, I have them look up words like implicit bias. What does nationality mean? What does race mean? What are some other ones? Just what's a stereotype? And then I asked them to do some research. Like, what if you told them, I want you to look up some old mascots from 20 or 30 years ago, and let's talk about why they were looked at as racist, why they were not appropriate anymore, and maybe why they thought it was appropriate then, but it's not anymore. And you can see that all throughout sports, right? So that is diversity. Now, authority is a lot of fun, because what I want to encourage you to do is to ask a police officer to come in to your team and just do some myth busting. I had this one officer come in when I was at this sports academy, and he came in and he was amazing. He brought in the rule book of laws, like the big old thick laws, and he just basically slammed it down. He was wearing his dress blues. He slammed this book down. He goes, "Gentlemen," this was all guys in that specific class, "I'm a police officer. The rules in this book, the laws in this book were voted on by your parents. I didn't write them, but I enforce them." And this is what he's saying, right? He goes, if I see you jaywalking and I say, "Hey, get back on the sidewalk," and you do, we're cool. But if I turn around and then you are again jaywalking, he's like, "I got to arrest you. I have to. You broke the law." He said, "So don't get mad at me when you decide that the law doesn't apply to you." And this is where I got this thing I say often. He goes, "Your actions are up to you, but your consequences are up to somebody else. And you don't have a say in that right now, your consequences." And so he did a whole bunch of myth busting. And then we also, I pulled up my Jeep in front of the gym, and then he pulled in behind me. And he goes, "Gentlemen, I want to show you how to be pulled over and walk away from this being pulled over." And I think everybody kind of got what he was saying because of the fear that a lot of people have when you get pulled over. I mean, my heart's just racing. I don't know what to do. I'm like 10-2. Like, what do I do? Don't reach for the glove box. There's so many things that I can teach my team. But when it comes from the police officer, oh my goodness, so great. So before I get to the next one, I want to encourage you to look around your academy, look around your school, look around your club, and know that you can bring in other voices. I mean, my whole business is based on the fact that I'm just repeating what you guys tell your team. Like, you tell your team, like, "All right, I want you to be disciplined. I want you to go home, make your bed." And your team's like, "Okay." And they do it once or twice. And then I come in as an outside voice, and I'm like, "Hey, I want you to make your bed." And they're doing it, And so I'm an outside voice, and you can use people around you that also have that inside voice. All right, the last one. Respect for women. Now, when I originally wrote this curriculum, it was for a male football team, and the amount of disrespect that they were showing to women around campus was out of hand. It was so bad, and so I put this in there. Now, if I was teaching this to like an all female, then I would probably change up a little bit of what I shared. But I just wanted to share this with you because I think it's some good information. And if you don't coach boys, it's cool. It just give me 1 second, and I'm gonna share this. So, what I would do with this is when you address this issue of respect for women and to a male team, what I have found the best practice is to address this when there aren't any females in the room, so that the guys can, because if you say anything and they're kind of going to, they're going to be looking over at, the woman in the room. And what I would do is I would post up on the PowerPoint a picture of whoever is the current, like, really pretty person. And you get the same responses from the guys, and they're just like, oh, this is great. Oh, well, yeah, look at her. And, nothing like too like sexy, but really just, they know, like, oh, that's beautiful. And then because I know them, I find a picture of one of their mothers who's very pretty, and I'll put it up. And, the guy's, oh, this is great. And there's one guy who's like mad. He's like, oh, that's ridiculous. That's my mom. You shut up. What this does is it lets them know that, like, look, why is that different? Because the people that we put up there before were somebody's mom, somebody's sister, somebody's wife. And now, because it's somebody that it's not appropriate. Here's the thing, fellas, it's not appropriate at all. And so that kind of opens up a discussion of how are we treating the women around us? How are we, are we respecting them? Are we, being nice people around them? This, we're not going to watch this video right now, but I would love for you to, what about when you're the female coach? That's a great question, Margaret. I don't know, to be honest with you. I can only speak on that question as being a former male athlete. And when I was a senior in high school, I had Coach K, and she was a volleyball coach. She was one of the assistant coaches on the volleyball team, and we loved her. And when you asked me that question, I think, could she have had that conversation? And I compare that to McCarthy, who was the male coach. And I try to think about, in my head, just my own personal experience. Could Coach K have delivered the same message? And I don't think it would have been received the same way as if McCarthy would have done that. I'm not saying that you can't, but there's an amount of comfortability for a guy as there is for a girl when it comes to sensitive topics like this. And the information that I just shared about this can absolutely be taught by anybody, well, female or male. The comfortability of that conversation is really probably the only difference. But I could be wrong. I just know that, and it's only anecdotal from my own experience. And so, yeah, I just think about being like a 17-year-old boy being taught this, and it's awkward. There are some topics that, Margaret, that I think would be really uncomfortable for someone who, I don't know, maybe not. I think it really just kind of depends on the relationship that the person that they see you as, because I think it's totally possible. Yeah, I think it's totally possible. There's one thing that I talk about when it comes to the respect for women. It's sexting. This is kind of when I bring up that topic of sexting. And I remind these, when it's all guys, I have a different message when I talk to girls. I tell the guys, I go, look, I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand, but if you have pictures of your girlfriend or some girl on, that goes to this school and she's under 18, that's also called child pornography. And that it's important that you understand that that's against the law. And you have to be very careful with that. It's a conversation that if I was their teacher, I don't know if I could have that conversation. If I was their coach, like, I'd have to be very careful how you broach that conversation. And so I may be giving you an experience that I've had that wouldn't be appropriate in your setting. And so I think it's important to kind of be aware of what's going on. Somebody raised their hand. I've never seen that before. Okay. Margaret says, I try to get to know the athletes well, and I'm quite open with them. Yeah. So an interesting thing that I saw happen was I brought in an older female coach, and she had been coaching for 40 years. And I noticed that she was able to talk about things that even I wasn't able to talk about. And so I think that matters, how they see you. I mean, just for a very an aesthetics reason, one of the reasons why I dress the way I dress, athletic, is because I kind of look the part of an athlete or of a coach. And I am a coach and I was an athlete, but there's something to be said when you come in and you're in shape, or they know that you've won championships. All of that stuff matters. These different variables definitely matter. All right. Let me see. There is. Okay. Angie, what is T? Great question. So consent is as simple as T. This is a consent video that is, I just play the.
If you're still struggling with consent, just imagine instead of initial.
It's like a 3-minute video. So I'm not going to play the whole thing.
Would you like a cup of tea? They go, oh my God, I would love a cup of tea. Thank you. Then you know they want a cup of tea. If you say, hey, would you like a cup of tea? And they're like, I'm not really sure. Then you can make them a cup of tea or not, but be aware they might not drink it. And if they don't drink it, then, and this is the important part, don't make them drink it. Just because you made it doesn't mean you are entitled to watch them drink it. And if they say,
so that is, it's a little bit longer than that, but I highly recommend it. It's on YouTube. There's a clean version, and then there's a version that he curses in. The cursing doesn't add anything to the video. It just kind of makes it a little more funny. But the whole thing is about a guy making tea for somebody, and forcing it, not forcing it, and all about consent. I found it to be a very soft way to share with athletes. Like, you need to have permission, and you need to be overly cautious about being with somebody. So great question. Consent is like tea. Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate it. I'll send a link in that in the replay. And so you'll have a link to that, as well as my Champions Notebook. All right. So the other 2 R's that's going to be in this curriculum is relationship and readiness. I'm almost done with that, but you'll be able to find that. And all of you have registered for this webinar, so you'll be able to. I'll let you know when it's there, and we'll do a discount for you as well. So I'd like to open it up to questions. I've got. Let's see, I've got the YouTube and I've got Zoom. So if you have any questions, I'd love to stay for a couple minutes and answer. I want to honor you for coming and hanging out with me for 30 minutes or so. We have next week, we've got Cletus Coffee, and he's going to talk about athlete transitions, which I think is a very underserved population. Athletes going from sport into life, and what that's like, whether it's they're high school and they're not playing in college, or they're in college and they didn't get a pro contract, or they're pros and then their career's over for some reason. He's going to talk about that. It's going to be a lot of fun. So I have thank you so much for coming. Let me see. What does you say? How do you get athletes to buy into your culture? Good question. First thing is, you better buy into it. It better be something that came from your heart. It better be something that you truly believe. You can't bring in a culture coach, which is something that is now becoming a thing. You can't bring in like somebody like myself, and then they just change everything, but you or the coaching staff don't believe it. So that's the first thing, is definitely you have to buy into it. Second thing is, you got to be consistent. It's everything that you do has to go back to that. Let me see if I have that book. It's called Oh, here it is. So Pete Carroll's Win Forever. Yeah, put that up there. Right. It's such a good book. I love it so much. And he talks about building a culture, but he also talks about, I'm going to turn this off. Let me see. Boom, stop share. Hey, all right, cool. So yeah, so Win Forever. It's a great book. I would recommend actually listening to it because he speaks it. It's awesome. But everything you do has to point towards your culture and be very defined about what you want. There's sometimes you're gonna have to get rid of people, like on John Gordon's book, the Energy Bus. It talks about kicking people off your bus, looking out for energy vampires, people that are going to drag down your culture. Sometimes they're just not a good fit, and they got to find somewhere else to go. Ryan, Invictus poem for males. I don't see it as male specific at all. There are some male specific poems that I've memorized with some of the athletes, but Invictus is very universal. I have found. I can't think of anything in there that makes it specific to males. Out of the night that covers me, black as a pit from pole to pole. No, I think it's a powerful poem, and it's old. But there are a lot of things out there that if you are looking for something like that, seriously, ask the kids. Is there a poem that you know of that, and then you can add that to your champion's notebook. All right, let's see, what else do we got here? In regards to team, what is your advice on choosing captains? Okay, I like it. Okay. That there are so many different ways to do that. There are have the team vote for the captain, but then give them a definition of what you think a leader is. There's a great book. It's called The Captain's Corner, and it talks about captains who were leaders weren't actually the best people on the team. They weren't the most athletically gifted, but they were the ones that were the glue for the team. And so that's a great book that I really need to organize the library. I really do, because I have no idea where that book is. But we read it last year with the book club, Captain's Corner. So the choosing captains, making sure that you say, look, this is the kind of captain I'm looking for. I'm looking for somebody who's totally bought into the culture. I'm looking for it's almost like you're putting out a job description. Now that I'm saying it. But I think that would be something that you would want to, do with the kids. One thing that I've started doing is I started asking teams, what kind of person, that's what it is. What kind of person do you want as a captain? And then they start describing people or different traits, and then say, okay, now that all those traits are there, I want you to think about that. Tomorrow, we're going to vote for team captains, or you do team captains every week. You're empowering somebody to have a voice on the team, and the kids will tell you who the captain is. So that was it's kind of all over the place, but you want somebody who's going to represent the program in a positive way. And it's not always going to be the best athlete. In fact, it usually won't be the best athlete. Something to remember, Michael Jordan was never a captain. He didn't want to be. So something to think about. All right, let's see. What else do we got here? I think we got all of them. Another great book, Only Way to Win by Dr. Jim Lohr. Okay, thank you. Let's see. Carlos says, some advice on how to win respect from young athletes when you're a young coach. Okay, and psychologist. Yeah, so the way you can win respect with an athlete, I was at IMG Academy and I was about to meet with some 11-year-old tennis players. And I had heard about this group and nobody wanted to teach this group. Kept hearing words like entitled and spoiled, and I had never met this group before. So I had no idea this is what people were saying. Well, I knew some of the kids that were going to be in my class at 1:00. And at 12:00, I knew that they would be walking through the gym or where we worked out. And when I saw them, I had my phone ready and I started doing this. And I made sure they saw me. I was like this. And one of the kids goes, "Coach, hey, coach." I go, "What's up?" He goes, "Are you catching Pokemon?" And I go, yeah, there's a Pikachu over here by the dumbbells. And he goes, no way. And he pulls out his phone and he's like, oh, boom. And he's doing all this way better than me, right? I had just downloaded it maybe 20 minutes before. So that worked, because 45 minutes later, when I showed up to class and I walked in, the guy that saw me catching Pokemon announced to everybody that I was the coolest coach here. And I had him after that. Another thing that I've done is I know all the Fortnite dances, right? So I can do all those. I learned all those because I wanted the kids to be able to have something to make fun of me, as I don't do them right. Like, I did that correctly. When I'm in front of the kids, I mess it up. I'm like, oh, you need to teach me. They love that. I've noticed some coaches are doing TikToks with their kids. More power to you, but they love that. The other thing is one of the first questions I ask my athletes is what they're reading in school. And then I go read that. So I read all the Harry Potter, not because I care at all about Harry Potter, but I cared about my kids. And so I could talk about the different things that Harry went through it as a leader, as he kind of grew up. So I would say get involved in know a little bit about what they're doing. It's different. I'm not saying like do all the stuff they're doing, but know about it and let them teach you something. Kids love that stuff. So great question. James, you ever considered asking your question or your athletes to define character traits and identify as being important, and then ask them to define how the trait looks on the field, in the classroom, at home, and in the training setting? Bob, that's a fantastic idea. Absolutely. You could do an entire hour on that. And I encourage you to do that, Bob. Well, sounds like you probably already have, but yeah, I'll spend an entire practice session on something like this, knowing that it's going to pay dividends later. That maybe I missed out on a couple drills with the cones, but whatever, like we'll make that up later. It's this character stuff that really helps. So great idea, Bob. Sherry says, are there any considerations for building a team culture in the individual sport versus a team sport? Absolutely. So when it comes to an individual sport or a team sport, the culture is the same, because the expectations are, here's how we practice. Here's how we show up to practice. Here's what we're doing. When it comes to the team sport, now you're adding in, we won't win unless everybody plays together. When it's an individual, you still have a team. It's just not a performance team. It's a support team. And so you can call it like that, like a wrestler. A wrestler can't get better without actually wrestling somebody else. But when they perform, it's just them. Or a swimmer's head is literally underwater. And so maybe they can hear when they come up, but it's right before the race that they're getting support from the team. It's right after the race that we get support for the team. So the culture is like, it's the barrel that everybody's in. They go out and do the performance, but then they come back into the barrel. And so it's not a whole lot different when it comes to the basics of having a positive environment, of having an environment that encourages competition, and an environment that encourages relationship and sharing. And so it's not a whole lot different. The only difference, like I said, is when you're actually performing. And so, yeah, I hope that answers your question, Sherry. All right, let's see. I think that is it for questions. Oh, I got another one. Bob. All right. Oh, wait. Nope, that one came up again. Cool. It's a great question, Bob. Let's see. I got that one. Answered that one. Buy into your culture. Got that. Ryan, got you. Okay, it looks like we're done. Okay. Fantastic. If there's no other questions, I got one. Dustin, how does volunteer coach influence athletic directors to provide an athletic development model to enhance our youth sports programs? Volunteer coaches in my community are given much direction. Yep, you don't have much say. I'm sorry to tell you that. The athletic director probably loves you, but doesn't really want you to have a voice in what changes stuff. Sometimes you'll get an athletic director, you'll get a coach that is very interested in what a volunteer coach has to say. And I wish I could give you better news, but that's just not something that is, that's a tough hurdle. That's a tough hurdle. Now, if it's a negative organization, get out. go somewhere else. There's plenty of organizations that need volunteers that'll be worth your time. But all that being said, focus on relationships, because a moment will come if they've seen that you're invested, that they go, do you have any ideas on how to make this better? And boom, you got to be ready for that. It's like putting a kid into the game. Like, are they ready to get in there? So have your ideas, have your ways of making things better, and just look for that moment, not to offend anybody by kind of pushing your agenda, but offering, hey, have you thought about this? That's the only way that I know to influence somebody at that level. All right. Dustin, I hope that answered your question. And I want to encourage you and thank you for being a volunteer coach. You are very valuable, very valuable. Okay, I think we're good. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today. And we'll be back here next week. I will send a replay out to everybody with the Champions Notebook and a link to the consent video, but you can find that. And then this curriculum will be ready, hopefully by next week, but I'll make sure that you all know about it. All right. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Jude. Margaret, thank you for your question. Thank you, brother. Carlos, thank you so much. Thank you, Dustin. Deer Park High School, thanks for joining. I appreciate you guys. Thank you, Eddie and Bronwyn. I'm going to put my glasses on. Yep, here we go. Bronwyn, thank you so much. Okay. Have a wonderful day. Stay safe. Love generously. Be intentional. We'll see you next week.